Russia's dependence on China? Yeah. Well, definitely what United States is doing is certainly provides legitimacy or I would say a precedent, for revisionist powers like Russia and China, which they would like to explore those options in their territories. But as far as dependency on China is concerned, that looks a rather difficult picture because Russia has like really deep-rooted ties with China, particularly the economic ties and also the defense ties. Okay, and given the fact that they are already fighting on the Ukrainian front, and and it seems that the war on the Ukrainian front, it's not ending. Definitely, it seems that it's going to go beyond at a certain stage, and even Europe looks like, with the way Europe is again focusing on militarization, there would be some kind of a friction clash in the future. That looks imminent. So I think given those equations, certainly Russia's dependence on China, or Russia's, I would say, falling in the Chinese camp, that looks very strong. I don't think that that's going to weaken.
Is there a possibility of a reset between the United States and Russia at some point of time? See, I'll take you back to the first week of January 2017 when Trump had come in to office, I think sometime in January, third week or whenever it is that he took oath. And there was very clearly, a new kind of stirring in the air that the US was looking at the potential for a reset. This is before the Mullen investigations and all took over. And there was no returning to that kind of approach. And so is there any possibility, because that would be the reset which ultimately weans Russia completely away from China, China being assuming that China is the long-term threat for the United States?
Well, I don't think there would be a perfect reset, but yes, as far as Russia's vision of the multipolar world is concerned, what Dr. Dugin likes to say all the time, and like in those circles, they believe that Trump has no problems with the multipolarity, and I've seen that the present dispensation in Russia, particularly Dr. Alexander Dugin and his thought-leading circles, they kind of like Trump, okay? And so, in fact, I got a chance to attend the Russophile movement conference, and there I had interactions with them, and they said that, well, we don't have a problem with the U.S. West is one of the poles, like U.S. is one of the poles, and they represent a great civilization, but we are against the hegemony, and they have high hopes on Trump because Trump agrees with their idea of traditionalism. That's one point. Also, ideological traditionalism, civilizational states, and multipolarity. But again, given the fact that you have so many, flashpoints across the world, the Middle East and all those things, they're hardcore geopolitical realities, So they cannot be swapped for, purely abstract or ideological dreams set aside by, the thinkers or philosophers. So I guess these hard geopolitical realities are going to continue, and they will be the friction points between the US
You just spoke
and Russia.
about India, you spoke about poles. So now how do you see India as a pole?
Good.
And are all poles
Yes.
equal? Do you have to be of a certain weightage to be considered a pole?
Thank you very much for asking this question. First, let me begin with appreciating what Dr. Raja Mohan said about strategic autonomy or multi-alignment. In fact, I agree that a lot of countries practice that, but we try to make a lot out of it. In fact, I must say that Pakistan has done a much better job with multi-alignment in a rather nasty way, engaging engaging Chinese, engaging Americans, engaging Saudis, engaging Turks, and we also came to know that they had opened a back channel with the Israelis and Moscow in between.
But you have their own prime minister condemning, this sort of situation.
Yeah. So that was just in a lighter vein or a serious vein. I wanted to say that. But yes, as far as India is concerned, India is something more than a swing state, but less than a pole. Swing state, yes, a pivotal swing state, which is non-committed, which has escaped the entrapments of alliances and ideological lock-ins, But then the strategic ambiguity or neutrality which India has maintained, it'll be difficult to maintain that in the future because, given the way all these countries are lining up together, like Pakistan, Turkey, and even in our neighborhood, let's say the Islamist regime in Bangladesh, changes in Nepal, will make it increasingly difficult to stay completely on the periphery or not take sides. For example, I mean, we always said that, we had great ties with the Saudis and, we had great ties with the Israelis, but then Pakistan ultimately ended up signing that strategic mutual defense agreement with the Saudis.
But
So
that's
it'll
not
be-
necessarily against India.
Yeah, I mean, it's
I
not
mean, many
against-
countries have such
it's
treaties
not against
and things like that. We don't need to read it as an anti-Indian.
What I'm saying is that, I think India's tilt towards the West with all these FTAs which we are signing these days, it's very distinct and remarkable. And regarding swing states, I would like to draw some analogy from the history. So we have some classic examples of swing actors from the Indian history. Examples of Vidur, Balram, and Madhya Naresh, So Vidur is again a swing state. He has that moral force, but not very strong military capability to shape the outcomes of the war. He is in frustration. He is watching from distance. Balram has good ties with the Kaurav brothers and Pandav brothers and has the capability to change the outcomes, but he makes a deliberate choice to stay out of it. In the end, he wants to intervene, but then he gets rubbished by Lord Krishna. Then we have Madhya Naresh, who had to choose the Kaurava side in the end for some strange reason, but then he ends up gaslighting Karna to ensure that finally the Karna is defeated. So what kind of swing state we want to become? But in all the cases, we have to ensure that a swing state without strong military and economic capability will end up being marginalized or standing on the periphery. And as far as
When you say swing state,
Yeah.
does that imply that such swing is in permanence? Or
No,
can
it's-
you swing,
Yeah,
one way or the
yeah.
other whenever
I mean,
the
it's-
requirement
yeah,
arises?
It's not in the permanence, as I said that. we
Anything
are-
wrong with
Yeah,
that kind of
no,
opportunistic behavior?
No, that's fine. In this brutish world today where transactionalism dominates, being a swing state, which can negotiate well and navigate well to secure its national interest, it's a great thing. Every country does that. But then if India wants to pursue strategic ambitions going beyond the short-term national interest, then it cannot afford to stay on the sidelines. And as I said earlier, that India is moving towards the pole, but a pole has its own attraction, and to move towards the pole, to be a true pole, India needs a strong and a complete overhaul of its internal economic systems, governance systems, education systems. Only with that overhauling will gain that comprehensive national power. Then only we can become a true pole.
But if economic power were the real criteria, and perfection of systems, etc., then by now Japan should have been one big pole. But you and I know that it's not really a pole. It's a great country, but it's not a pole by itself today.
In this case, well, I must say that India represents a certain civilizational, I would say, spectrum, a civilizational pole in this part of the world. And that legacy is very strongly with us. So we have that ideological civilizational part, in this, the presence in South Asia, and I guess the world recognizes that strong legacy, strong history, which may not be as strong in the case of Japan. But in India's case, it's certainly strong. But once again, I mean, to gain that economic and that technological might, we need to put in a lot of efforts. I mean, look at the number of Indian universities in the QS rankings. I guess not even one. But I think IITs, they fall like after 100, and you have about several Chinese universities in the top 100. In the Fortune 500 global companies, 130 Chinese companies, 9 Indian companies are there, and most of them are public PSUs, and they are working in the banking center, not the manufacturing giants. So I guess, and our education system, and in fact, I would say our governance systems, we need to completely change it. I mean, an overhauling is required. I'm not denying it, but then